Hi, my name is Greg Dixon, and I'm here with Margo Arrowsmith of Your Perfect Retirement Living. And today we're going to talk about fun travel options for retirement living. I'm going to just say, you see this RV in the background. It's a Class C, basically a big Texas pickup truck. Bonnie and I have lived in this more or less since 2017. We haven't always moved a lot, but we've parked it in various places, and we're sleeping in it to this day. And I think we've gone between 18,000 miles between the alligator line and the snow line. So we've been across North America all the way to Key West. We went as far as Key West with this,
Wow.
and we've had some adventures over the years. And we're going to talk to Margo because she's had some friends who also lived in an RV, and we're going to talk about um, living on a cruise ship, which is not quite as expensive as you might think as an option for your retirement living. So, Margo, do you want to introduce yourself and tell your stories?
Yeah, yeah. I'm Margo Arrowsmith, and I am the author of the course Your Retirement Living, and I help guide people to decide before retirement comes what they really want. Now, today we're going to talk about just spending your life traveling, and I want to reiterate first that in my course we start out with teaching you how to find out what exactly it is you do want, not what everybody else thinks you should want, and not what your 30-year-old self thought you should want, but what in fact do you really want. Some people come up with traveling. Now, an RV is a great way to do it. I think what Greg showed you is a camper. I think that's officially called that. I'm not sure they're RVs. I have friends from that I went to high school with who I went to high school in Iowa, and as some of you may know, it gets really cold in Iowa in the winter. So what they do, they wanted to stay home, and they do live in their house. However, they didn't want to be bogged down with snow and having it so cold in the winter. So they got an RV, and what they do is travel to Arizona every winter. And what they're called, by the way, there's a name for this. It's called snowbirds, which I kind of like that because when the snow comes, the birds go south. I was first introduced to this many years ago. I lived in New Jersey at the time, and my parents lived in San Diego, California. And my father also, but my mother was just really missing me. She wanted to see me so badly. For many years, mom had had agoraphobia. And it kind of, once they sold their business, it kind of got a little worse. But the idea of them, there's no way she was going to get on an airplane. And the idea of them traveling across country, staying in, having to get out of the car to go into a hotel or a restaurant was just not going to happen. So dad came up with the idea. They bought a smaller RV, one of the smaller types. I don't remember what model theirs was. Greg might know, but I don't. And they traveled across the country. They towed their Buick behind them. The kind of what an RV does, if you can see on Greg's, there's a cab in the front that's actually separate from the living quarters. In an RV, it's all opened up in the front so that the driver's seat and the passenger seat, when you park at night or when you park for a month or two, however long you do, those driver seats turn around and they become lounge chairs for the living room. It was something. Mom had a whole collection of teddy bears, so they would take all their teddy bears and put them up in the cabinets, and that way they used to call it putting the teddy bears to work. But what would happen is it would keep their dishes from rattling around, so nothing was ever broken. But they had a beautiful bedroom. There were several, I think up above the driver's seat could be made into a bed. I mean, there were just beds all over the place at night, but they had a kitchen. They had a kitchen. They had a lounge area. I mean, it was quite lovely. Anyway, they got to come and see me, and they were very happy. So then they traveled back to San Diego, back to their house, which this took a year. So they rented out their house while they were gone. It was time for their house to not be rented. And the people they sold their business to were like we can't do it. We're not as good as you are. We can't do it. So they gave them the business back, which they weren't happy about, but they both went back to work. And then it got to be retirement time, and Mom was it was getting harder for her to even go into work. So they bought a larger RV. And basically when they did that, they sold their house. They sold everything except the things that were the most dear to them. And they traveled all over the country. I love what Greg said about how far they went. Mom and Dad had a little map with of the United States, and then it had Alaska and Hawaii. They never got there. But of mainland United States, they got to every state in the union with the exceptions. And I feel bad that they didn't get to Oregon and Washington. And for some reason, although they crisscrossed back and forth across the country, they never quite made it to Arkansas. I have no idea why. They didn't know why. It just never quite happened. I think I was talking to Greg, and Greg, you can tell me this. I think you had said that with all even in your traveling down to Florida, that Arkansas was a state that you missed getting into also. I don't know what it is about Arkansas.
Yeah. I've been pretty much in every state in the US except for 5, everything west of the Mississippi, except for some reason, I've seen the trees of Arkansas, but never actually crossed the border. I don't know what it is. It's pretty weird. Like if I showed you the map, there's all these lines all around it. Like we were in Branson, Missouri, and that area. So we were really close. And I guess we could have just, driven the 10 miles or something, touched my toe on the across the border and come across so I could check it off my list. But
yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that you and my parents both, with all that traveling, never made it to Arkansas. Yeah. But one of the reasons that it was so great for Mom and Dad was they ran small town newspapers, and they loved it, but it is very labor intensive work. So they never went on vacation. I mean, when I was growing up, I think we spent 5 days once at the Wisconsin Dells, which was lovely. I was little. It's the only vacation they ever went on the whole time I was growing up. And they really didn't after that much either, but there were places they wanted to go and things they wanted to do. So while they did it to accommodate my mother's emotional issues, it enabled them to go and see things that they had never been able to see, during their working lives. And so that's one reason why people might want to do it. Of course, another reason is if you live up north and want to stay there, but don't want to be there all year, an RV is a great place to do it. Because not everybody wants to actually own 2 houses, or, and paying rent for doing something like that gets a little astronomical. But they would stay at RV parks, and they loved it. Dad met a lot of people, and Mom not so much, because of course she wasn't getting out, but they met a lot of people. Every once in a while they'd stop by in Iowa and pick up my mother's brother and his wife, and they'd come out east to visit me with my mom and dad. So, they could bring company with them if they want. When they were visiting in New Jersey, I would bring my daughter and her friends out, and they always had a good time out in the RV. So it's just really a very versatile way to do it. And then one time they were in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which they were enjoying very much. They'd been there a couple of months, but all of a sudden there was, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was one of the huge hurricanes. And of course, everybody's panicking because, batten down the hatches and, trying to get out of there. Well, all Mom and Dad had to do was just, put the Buick back on the RV and drive out. And so they were able to avoid the bad weather there. It was a lovely thing to do. So there are people who, and again, they were also very happy about getting rid of all their stuff. They had some lovely things, but they'd gotten to the age where they were tired of their stuff. And now not everybody wants to do that. So, some people are very attached to their things. So you kind of, if that's something you're thinking about, you kind of want to look at that. Well, am I going to be okay, not having my paintings on the wall and not having my books? But they were. But anyway, so how did you guys enjoy it, Greg?
Yeah, no, we had a great time. And that thing about you said about being up north is our thing is we tried to stay between the snow line and the alligator line, because California is way better to be in November than say Saskatchewan or Winnipeg or Minnesota, you know,
Minnesota or Iowa, yes.
or Iowa, any of those northern places where they have real winter. This year, normally we spend the summers in or the winters in California because Bonnie has relatives in the Mojave Desert and the Los Angeles area. But this year we did it backwards. But I should warn you, we're of the 5 states that we haven't been to, North Carolina is one of them, and we're thinking this fall that we're going to head across Canada because we have relatives in Alberta and Manitoba, Winnipeg, even, and then Toronto, and then Quebec. My son lives in Montreal with his family, and we have their family, his wife's family, mostly in Cape Breton, and then after that, it's just a slide down the coast to come and see you.
Well, you don't have to warn me. You're more than welcome. And one of the nice things about doing this when you go to visit people is they never have to worry about putting you up. And even with mom and dad, it was, at night they'd like to go back down to their place. Because at one point I was living in an apartment building in Montclair, New Jersey, and there was an alleyway, and they parked that thing in the alleyway. And it was quite, I mean, the whole neighborhood would come and watch Dad back that huge thing into this little alleyway, but he did a good job. But so they would come up and eat with me and spend the day with me, but then, they could go downstairs. I didn't have to worry about finding room for them. So it's a wonderful way to visit relatives.
Yeah. Even we prefer that too. Usually people say, well, you can come and sleep in the house, but we usually like to sleep in, even here, we're parked in my brother's backyard and there's a room in here where we come and work in there, but we still sleep out in the RV.
Yeah.
And the other thing about it is almost everybody in this town has some kind of vehicle because the whole town was evacuated November before last because of flooding. And it's handy to be able to just drive away. So we drove down across the border and went to California.
Well, again, that's what mom and dad did when they were in Myrtle Beach, when they had one of their biggest, I wish I could remember the name, but one of their biggest hurricanes. And they were able to avoid the whole thing. So without any trouble at all. So that's certainly a way. Now, mom and dad, at some point, I got to say this too, at some point, I think when dad was about 75, they decided that he didn't want to be driving around anymore. I mean, he probably could have, but they had gotten a little tired of it by that time. So they settled down in Raleigh, North Carolina, because it was very close to me. However, I saw a video. I wish I had a copy of it, but I saw a video on Facebook the other day, and they were interviewing a woman who was 93 years old. Next to her was her little dog. And she and her husband were planning on doing this. However, in a couple of years earlier, when they were in their late 80s, he died. And she decided, well, I'm not going to let this stop me. So there she was, 93 years old, with her little dog, driving a big RV all over the country and doing just fine. So again, while mom and dad stopped at 75, and you may want to do that. You may want to have a plan for after the travel period, but not necessarily, because that woman sure didn't. And she's very happy, except she misses her husband, but she's very happy. So again, you want to know yourself. And that's one of the things I teach people in the course. You want to know yourself to know whether or not this is something you're going to want to keep doing, or whether or not you're going to want to do it for a shorter period of time. Or if you want to do it like Greg and Greg and his wife have done, and do it periodically, but still having a home to go back to. I mean, there's lots of ways. That's what the beauty about this is. There's so many different ways of doing it.
Yeah. And the other thing we're going to talk about is living on a cruise ship, which is a interesting option and not as relatively expensive as you might think.
Well, and it's not cheap, but it's a lot less expensive often than going into assisted living or even independent living. Because what happens is the cruise ships, they like to keep themselves booked up, and they aren't always booked. I mean, I had a friend who used to like to cruise, and she said, if you get in at a certain time, by the time the ship takes off, a lot of the higher level apartments or whatever they call them haven't been filled, so they'll bump people up. So she knew how to get herself bumped up a lot, so she was real thrilled with that. But the point is that they aren't always full when they take off, and they like it. So if they have somebody that lives there 365 days a year, they love that because they know that that's always going to be full. One of the things to remember is, people think when they go into assisted living, and again, lots of people are happy there, but when they go into assisted living, that they're going to be taken care of. And I teach people how to find out exactly what's going on in another area. But one of the things, none of them have medical care. They don't have doctors. They don't even have a nurse on. They don't even have a nurse that comes in during the day. Sometimes they'll have a visiting doctor who comes like once a week, or they'll take people in a bus once a week to go to the doctor. But if you have like an emergency, you get carted off in an ambulance. Okay. A cruise ship has all the time in residence a doctor, an MD, and nurses all the time. So in fact, if you're on a cruise ship, not only might it be less expensive than being in assisted living, for example, but in fact, you can get better care because if something happens, there's a doctor and there's a nurse, and they even have a little infirmary to take you to. So, again, it's not the cheapest thing in the world. However, if you're already planning on spending a fair amount of money on independent living or assisted living, this is an option you might want to look at. And again, maybe not for your whole life, maybe for your whole life. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
You need to decide for yourself.
Yeah. So I just did a little bit of research on what it costs to live on a cruise ship per year, and it's about estimates around $72,000 to $80,000 a year. I'm sure you can spend more. Like I've known people who've gone to the Antarctic on a cruise that cost about that amount. But for ones that go around, there's some you can just sort of go around the world and go around
So yeah,
and
I'm sorry, Greg, go ahead.
yeah, no. So from some of the numbers we've talked about for assisted living and independent living, it can be quite a bit more than that.
Well, assisted living around here is somewhere between $9,000 and $11,000 a month, which is, yes, what would that be, about 120 or 130,000 a year? So yes, you'd have $50,000 left.
Yeah.
And again, you probably have to be real careful about not getting too fat because they got food constantly, but there's entertainment every night. There's on the one hand, there's new people to meet. And on the other hand, there's the crew, which are pretty much, there. So there's people that, there's new people all the time, new things to do all the time. If you're into adventure, that just might be something you want to look into.
Yeah, and the other thing is it could actually save money on your death expenses too.
I love that, Greg.
Because I knew some people in the business, and they said that they don't advertise this, but on every cruise, usually there's one or two people who die. And if you can arrange to be buried at sea, you can save a lot of trouble.
And they actually do let people be buried at sea. That's very interesting. I love it. So yeah, and if you like to see different places you've never been to before, or, like my mom and dad who'd never had a vacation, well, you'll have some vacation. So yeah. So those are two exciting ways to do it.
Yeah. It's funny that this come up this week. I went to a sort of a business office hours thing with Marie Forleo, and one of the women there really loved ancient sites and sort of ran on tours and stuff. My mother was really interested in anthropology and ancient history, and she did a tour. She went to Egypt, and she also went to Greece, and she really loved exploring.
Oops. Greg, I'm sorry, you have frozen on us. Can you hear me, Greg? And I really wanted to hear about this traveling in exotic places. Let me see, Greg. Well, folks, I am very sorry, and I hope you're seeing me. I hope we're not both frozen, but Greg is. I'm sorry we're missing what he was going to say. However, that's live TV for you, as they say. So it doesn't always work out the way it's supposed to. There we go. Okay. So all right. So I think I get Greg went away, so I'm going to guess that he was having some technical problems, which happens. But thank you, folks. These are some of the things that we talk about in the course. To get to us, you go to yourperfectretirementliving.com and you will learn more about the course and everything we offer. And I hope to see you there. And next week, next Saturday, we'll be back here. And in addition, on Mondays, I do a live show, which is called Age Out Loud. This coming Monday, I'm going to interview a man named Drew Becker, who has a very interesting story about how near retirement age, he stopped doing the career he had always done and started a publishing business. He published, as a matter of fact, he published my book for me. Does a great job. So I hope that you'll be with us on Monday, and we'll see you. I don't.
Hey, Margo. Yeah, I don't know what. Yeah, what happened? This has never happened to me. My computer just decided to reboot in the middle of the broadcast. So there we go. So it's StreamYard's pretty tough.
Well, I carried on without you, but but we just have a couple of minutes left, but can you finish your story? Because I'd like to hear it.
About my mother?
Yeah, of the anthropology and the archaeology.
Yeah. She ended up so she ended up going to Egypt and Greece, and went to a lot of the pyramids and the ancient sites. She also went to Machu Picchu and in Peru and China. So
wow.
Yeah, and so
Your
she
mother
just
was adventuresome.
yeah, she actually she was a little bit frustrated. She wanted to go to school, to go to university to study anthropology, but the her parents sent the boys to school to but yeah, and I guess they sent her youngest sister to nursing school because I guess they figured that was practical. So
Well, it's okay to be a nurse for a girl back in those days.
yeah, it was that was a official.
Not an archaeologist.
Yeah, and but I really think she got to travel, she read lots, and she studied, so she was a lay anthropologist in her own way, right?
Yes.
And I think she would have driven the instructors nuts at the university anyway.
Well, all right. Well, thank you, everybody. And again, to go to the website to find out more about the course, yourperfectretirementliving.com, and you can find out a little more. And did you want to say something, Greg?
Yeah, no, I'm just going to put that link on the screen here.
Okay.
There we go. Your Perfect Retirement Living, and then there's the title.
Yeah,
and it's also going to be in the chat too, and go check it out. And what you mentioned it briefly, but the process is that you take people through and they go figure out where they're at, what they want to do, and come up with the options. Because we talked about living in an RV and a cruise ship, and that's not for everyone, for sure. But and one of the ones that you talk about a lot is the option just to simply stay at home, right?
Stay at home, but it helps. But there's certain things that it makes it better if you do these certain things.
Yeah, and so so a hybrid of that could be stay at home and then plan to go on a cruise ship once in a while, or go, maybe you've got a favorite relative or somebody, and go, rent an RV and go do a little bit of traveling.
Well, that's a good idea too. But that's what my mom and dad did. Mom had the agoraphobia, so she didn't want to leave the house. So basically they traveled across the country in their house. So
yeah. House on wheels.
Problem.
Yeah. I got a story related to that. There's somebody on the Work Camper podcast, and anyway, she had a corporate job, and then she was thinking of getting a mini house to live in, right? And
Yeah.
then she come across an RV site or RV living. He says, "Well, that's kind of like a mini house, but it has wheels."
And it's very much like a mini house with wheels. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. And
Um,
then the funny thing is, the reason she was on the podcast is that she took a course on RV maintenance. There's a
ah,
company, down in, I think it was in Georgia or something. There was you can do it study on home, but you can go there and study in person. Anyway, she turned out that she really loved septic systems on RVs. She had become a specialist. I think her address is royalflush.com.
oh, I
You know,
love that. Oh, I
yeah,
love that.
yeah, so she'd go into a little town and talk to all the other RV maintenance people because most of the people don't want to touch that, right?
Oh, isn't that amazing? Oh, that's wonderful. And therefore, she then was able to support herself while she was traveling around the country. Oh,
Yeah, yeah. So that's a topic for a future conversation. Is that
yeah,
you can actually earn some money while you're traveling.
exactly.
Anyway, thank you everybody, and yeah, go check it out. Your perfectretirementliving.com, and we'll see you soon.
Bye bye.
Bye.